Orbert and Chultersin.
Peter Gallagher, perhaps, seeing Letterkenny as the capital of a Gaeltacht county. Paddy Tunney is a man immersed in the language and traditional culture of Ireland. And even before the arrival of Courtaulds, he's been worried by the withering of tradition in the area.
Another thing that I'm very sore about is the fact that our own official native language is not supported to the degree that it should be in a community where one would have anything up to 200 native speakers. I made great efforts to at least have one Gaelic Mass per month in the cathedral, and I failed after 3 years having the odd one. Now we have a showpiece on Patrick's Day, and there is no one to blame for that, only the clergy and the bishop.
One's not saying that they're going to come here and want a big nightlife, but they do want some extra facilities that the town hasn't got at the moment. I think the idea of the swimming pool is very good, and I think extra sporting facilities and things like that. It takes time to really build up, if you like, a feeling for a town that's going to have to accommodate a large factory. I think the demand will come from the people that are there, not so much from the people that we're bringing in, because they're relatively few in number. But if you've got a wage and salary bill of something like 2 million or in excess of £2 million a year, somebody's going to have to spend it somewhere.
Paddy Tunney, as he works at home, is constantly reminded of the Courtaulds project. A folk music collector of international stature, his concern is with the traditional values and the quality of life in the area.
I think that it should enrich the life, the cultural life of the community, if it's properly channeled, the talents that may come in. We may get the rough, but we'll get a lot of the smooth too. And I should think that with a bit of initiative here, that we should be able to channel things so that the cultural and community life of the people of Letterkenny and then environment around it should be greatly enriched. As long as we remain ourselves and don't become little English robots because that Courtaulds are an English firm, there's great possibilities, tremendous possibilities for this community in Letterkenny and this part of East Donegal, in spite of Cuhulla's sunken Shonian village epithet.
I think that the town itself has obviously got to develop very considerably to accommodate what I expect will be considerable increases in population during the next few years.
Correct, the complete change. In the days gone by, even good farmers mightn't have had any, say, for argument's sake, lino in the bathroom, and today it's all carpet in the bathroom.
Housing problems. Young people coming in to live here, there'll be a certain anonymity that we don't have at the moment, and a certain sense of, you know, being cut off from other people, not knowing the people around, and certain loneliness will come as a result of it, you know.
If I were where I once was, and that would be local government, which is very much concerned with planning and development and so forth, would have been perhaps a crash programme by the NBA, the National Building Agency. In other words, commission them, give them a brief and say, right boys, there you are, get going, and here's what we've got to do, and here's the time we've got to do it in, and you're going to do it.
I think so. With the advent of the county manager and that system, which seems to me to be more progressive, the urban council cannot do a lot of good. They criticise a lot, but their hands are tied as far as doing much good for the town.
Director, receive your order efforts by the Holy Inspiration and carry them on by the gracious assistance that every word and work of ours may always begin from thee, and by thee be happily ended through Christ our Lord. Amen. Amen. There's one document to be sealed. House transfer. Well, the next item on the agenda is a discussion on the town plan, which has arisen principally as a result of court halls, and in order to give the new members an opportunity of reviewing it, the plan has been circulated, and any member who wishes to express his views will get an opportunity of doing so. And the county manager has a few words to say on it. To begin, I'll call on the manager.
Right, Chairman and Councillors, the plan, as you see, was adopted on the 14th of May 1973. That's the current version of the plan.
Desmond Williams, Donegal County Manager, Dubliner by birth, professional, conscientious, very hard-working, conservative and a very private person.
And the adoption on the 14th of May 1973 was the final act in a long series of discussions, studies and meetings which began about a year previously. The bulk of the work leading up to the adoption of the plan, of course, was done in 1972 and in the very early months of 1973. And that was before we knew that court halls were coming to Letterkenny, which means that we did not have the advantage of that knowledge when we were undertaking these various studies. The revision of a plan is something which goes on continuously, of course. You just don't start a few months before it's due and then do it. It's a continuous process. But your comments will be of immense value to them before they start the statutory revision.
Anybody wish to speak? Councillor Patrick O'Donnell.
Mr. Chairman and fellow councillors, all the talk now about court halls and this town would not be ready for the impact of court halls upon us is all wrong.
Patsy O'Donnell, Fianna Fáil, longest-serving member of the council, first elected 1945, member of the VEC and on the council of the Regional Technical College, critical of itinerance, known locally as Patsy himself.
This plan was devised a way back in 1968 and adopted, as the manager says, in 1972. The only thing that I see wrong with the plan, that we developed the town to one side. We left out the Leck side of the parish. And I would make one suggestion, that the new road now leading from the station over to Old Town, there's a branch road there known as the Canal Road. And I think myself that if that road was developed down and a bridge put across the river at Leck, you could open up all that territory and develop it for housing, which the land is now getting scarce, and that would leave us hundreds of acres in that part of the town. The town is growing, and the population at the moment is 6,000, and we expect in 4 years, when court halls come along, to have 10,000. One of the greatest mistakes that this council made was in planning that we didn't plan enough of houses. We had the land, but we didn't provide the houses. The council as a whole, I must say, backed me firmly in trying to provide 100 houses in this town, but the manager couldn't see his way to build them, and we have fallen down very badly on the housing programme. That is my comments, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Dorian.
I would like to agree with what Councillor O'Donnell has said in relation to the housing in the town. We do seem to have fallen far behind in our housing programme. As well as that, at a recent council meeting, we did discuss fairly thoroughly the fact that the sewerage, the existing sewer in the Glencairn area, was not, in the opinion of the council, sufficient to cater for the existing houses. Nevertheless, we were told that it was sufficient, and was sufficient, in fact, to carry the recent development that's taken place there. Even though, as was pointed out by Councillor Halpin on a number of occasions, in one particular place the sewer is seen to overflow. However, to get down to more basic things,
Hugh, or more properly Hubert Dorian, from Fanard, Neil Blaney's townland, and a devoted disciple, a school teacher elected to the council at his first attempt, a very active politician.
I would imagine that this report has arisen as a result of, or perhaps more as a follow-up to, the Buchanan report. I would get that impression because the plan, again, is not so much dealing with Letterkenny as dealing with Letterkenny, that is the urban area, and the hinterland as well. Now, if you sort of consider for the moment what's involved in the Buchanan report and the Mansfield plan, the Buchanan report merely says that there should be certain centres for industrialisation, certain industrial centres. Letterkenny, as it so happened, is one of these industrial centres. Now, the theory is that the small farmers would be forced out of business in this great big common market. And the small farmers who are in that way forced out of farming would find jobs in the nearest large industrial town. These small factories, which the government of the 60s, the good Fianna Fáil government which we had under the good leadership of Sean Lamass, which they so assiduously worked for, they're now, for various reasons, falling apart. I would say this idea of having small towns with small industries, that is so much academic waffle. As well as that, the first part of this community development on page 32 here, what we're saying is that the quality of life in rural Ireland is something exceptional. Father McDyer, as I remember right, during the great debate on the common market, argued the point about the quality of life. And the one point that he stressed, and the one point that we're faced with in Letterkenny is this: do you want the quality of life or do you want a big industrial town? You can't have both. Page 36, I'll skip page 33 because it's merely a repetition of the same thing. Page 36, there's something here which caught my eye as well. Yes, there are a number of things there. In introducing the Planning Act, it was pointed out that it is now generally accepted, quote, that a good environment materially assists economic expansion. This indeed is true, but the quality of life in County Donegal has a value far beyond mere economic considerations. But the question is, can we as people who are confronted with rapid industrial growth, which is what we're preparing for, can we afford to consider in depth the quality of life away down the bottom of Fanard, or at the far end of Rathmullen, or some such place? I doubt if we can.
Mr. Chairman, while we were going into it thoroughly, going into all points of it, we certainly felt as a body at that time that we were going to be abolished.
James Larkin, another of the council's Blaneyites, member of an old Letterkenny family, first elected to the council in 1967, a petrol station proprietor prominent in GAA circles.
And we certainly didn't expect to be here in the month of October, adopting or going through the revised plan. And one point which I made at that time, Mr. Chairman, which seemed to fall down, probably because that the threat of being abolished seemed to disappear. But I still feel myself that it's only really a stay of execution that we've got. I still think it's in the minds even of the present government to eventually do away with the smaller councils. And I remember at that time, Mr. Chairman, saying that, and indeed the full council were in agreement with it, that the most important thing for us to do at that time was to extend our boundary. And everybody was in agreement with it. There were no word of courthouse, as mentioned already at that time, but had we gone ahead and extended our boundary, or looked about extending it, which we didn't do, we would find that courthouse today would be inside the urban area. As it is at the moment, it's outside. I figure, Mr. Chairman, that if we moved only something like about, and it's not worth talking about, 50 yards outside the present urban boundary, that's not very far. I figure we would have our 9,000, if not 10. And it's something that I think that we should seriously think about, and that is extending our boundary and extending the sewerage and water facilities in the direction that Councillor O'Donnell talked about. it may be some part of the council's fault, because this council seemed to have bought the land all at this side of the town.
Anthony Gallagher, Fianna Fáil, first elected in 1955, wool and pig dealer, unique record of good attendance at urban council meetings.
The planners seem to have followed the council more than the council followed the plan. And I think the government in Dublin should give more to a northern town like Letterkenny. I think that it would do very well. We're out on our own here. Donegal is kind of a unit on its own. And I think that they should get more from the government. And I think if it is only for example sake, for our little six, they should look about as better.
Councillor Halpin.
Mr. Chairman, the next decade will see a complete transformation in this town. The population that took 50 years to grow, to double from 1911 to 1961, is now going to double in the next decade. This is entirely due to something, a great boon that has come to this town, thanks to the last days of the last government.
Anthony O'Halpin, official Fianna Fáil, a school teacher, in fact teaching